Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lecture 9 for Chapter 9, Industrial Transformation in the North, 1800 to 1850. Today, we'll be discussing a few topics that includes early industrialization, money problems, the transportation revolution, and class division. So kind of taking a look at the four different kind of categories of this change in this time of intense transformation leading up to the Civil War. So starting off with early industry, we have a boom at this time in the United States of a transition to industrialization of factories instead of strictly agricultural and strictly farm work, right? Um, this is following the Industrial Revolution in Europe. So we're a little bit late to the game, but we catch up pretty quickly. And that's thanks to people who owned and worked in factories in Europe coming over to the United States and setting up shop here. One of those men is here, Samuel Slater, who was a British migrant who brought plans for a textile mill from England to the United States to essentially replicate what he experienced and what he worked on with in England, replicate it here. And it took off in the United States. It completely changed the landscape of the way that we produce things and the way that we conduct international trade. We don't need to spend so much money on imported goods anymore because we can make them for much cheaper here in our own country, and we can handle the price and the profit of it a lot better than we can for things that we're bringing in from the other countries. So mills and factories are going to completely revolutionize the landscape of the country. And you'll notice I didn't go a whole lot into that because that's pretty much the entire focus of the chapter. And as always, I don't go over details of the chapter because you have to read the chapter. So I'm just picking up these highlights here. But that is a very important thing that really sets us off and leads us into this money problem thing that we have going on, where you don't have any. The country is getting to a point where we've got just all the spending going on, and not enough taxes being raised in order to really help us to stay afloat during this time. So we during this time we have the banks that are kind of trying to make ends meet. Now, at this time, banks did not operate the way that we understand them to operate today. Banks didn't really have any federal government rules to follow. They each had their own individual rules and policies. Your money was not guaranteed to be held in that bank or given to you for any reason. And so the banks are making a profit off of lots of things at this time, and then all of a sudden are no longer making that profit. And so we start to have these issues with banking here. This is a political cartoon here that talks about the new edition of Macbeth, Banquo's ghost, right? And so it's the bank being put on to kind of its deathbed by different changes happening with international trade, with tariffs, with strife in between the North and the South, and in general, this adjustment to a new type of economy, a new way of conducting business and making money that's not easily transitioned, that we can't just flip a switch and then immediately bring it on, immediately switch over to that new thing. This is essentially what I'm trying to say. Our third point here is going to be the transportation revolution. So, along with this industrial revolution and along with this money problem, is this great transportation revolution that happens. All of a sudden, we have all kinds of better, faster, more efficient ways of traveling and moving not only people but goods as well, throughout the country and even internationally. This is a map of the state of New York that shows its canals and railroads, and you can see the entire state is connected one way or another, either by a river, stream, or something, and by these canals and railroads that they built. This will happen all over the country, in different phases and different periods, and some states will take it much faster than others will. So uh, that means that some states will be kind of late to the game as far as public transportation goes, if they ever get it at all. A lot of the southern states will be resistant to really heavily investing in railroads and these other transportation revolutions that would increase their economy and increase their ability to move goods and people. And that's because the South is primarily an agricultural based economy. And what do you need for agricultural based economy? You need land. You need lots of land to raise the animals and to grow the food. And so if you take away that land to put in railroads or roads or canals, then your economy is going to tank, right? It is the view of these people at this time that we cannot invest in these railroads because they're just going to tear up our good farmland, our good pasture land. And we're making do with what we have now, and everything's fine. We don't need to make any kind of adjustments. So that will be kind of the sentiment of the southern states. The northern states like New York and the other states in the area will really invest in this. And that's because they have a much different kind of landscape. It's a little bit more difficult to move things over land in these areas. And so they will invest in all kinds of ways to make that better and easier and safer and more efficient. And so that's what we see here with the map. As we start moving west, our middle states will have not that many railroads, but they will have very long railroads. And that is because there's not a lot of people. So it's not hitting every part of the state because not every part of the state has people living in it. So those will be really, they will grow up as the states in the West grow up and be very heavily tied to where people are locating and where they are residing as determining factors of what way the railroads go, and then ultimately what cities form and what cities take precedence in those states. So the transportation revolution is a huge thing, especially on the back of the industrial revolution. When we get better at creating these goods, and now we're also really good at moving these goods to people throughout the country and even outside of the country. And finally, this ultimately will lead us to class divisions, because we've got this new kind of growth of a factory worker, is going to change this landscape. It's a new way of living in the cities and functioning as a citizen. This is entirely brand new, the new area. And whereas people previous to this had been out on their own individual plots of lands or in smaller groups throughout the areas surrounding a city, now we're starting to move into a city because now we've got lots of jobs in the city, and now we've got lots of ways of moving up in the city, right? It's not just for the rich people to live in. We can all kind of make some sort of living in the city thanks to the industrial revolution, thanks to the increase of factories and mills. So this is a breakdown of economic divisions in the United States during 1850. Now, it's important to remember that while our definitions for these broad class divisions and economic divisions have changed significantly from the 1850s, they are still fairly on point, right? So what I mean by that is at this time, the upper class are going to be your Vanderbilts a little bit later, but your Vanderbilts, your politicians, your people who are at the top of society, have all the money, have all the power, have all the influence, and it's not going to be that many people. And majority of your people are going to be middle and working class. Middle class is going to be people who own the factories, who own a factory or two, but it's also going to be people who are let's say higher up in these factories and mills. We don't necessarily have the idea of managers yet, at least not in a widespread way. But think of that type of person, someone who's up there, who's working for the owners of the factory, but at a very high level, right? That'll be your middle class. Majority of your citizenry is going to be working class. These are the people who are working in the factories, working in the mills, but also working on the farms, working on the pastures, right? Owning those types of income generating things. This will be where your merchants are, and this will be where your dock workers are, right? So you can see while we might be tempted to think, oh, everyone who owned something, owned a business, owned a factory, owned something, was super rich and was the upper part of the society, that's not actually how it breaks down. They're actually closer together. There's still a huge divide between factory owner and the factory worker, but there's a closer unity there than there is between the middle and the upper classes at this time. And one could argue throughout a lot of American history, that's how that plays out. So I'm gonna leave you with that here. Oh no, sorry, I had one more. The other fun little thing to note about this time is this is the time that the circus really takes off, especially in America. Carnivals and circuses and traveling performances had always been a thing for forever. You know, you could look back to the ancient Greeks and ancient Egyptians, and they had similar um, groups who would do this, but it really takes off in America during this time because of that working class. This is what the working class saved their money up for. This is what they did for their entertainment. That is who these types of shows were geared towards. And so it will take off in an absolutely spectacular way during this time. So quick takeaways, I'll leave you here with this for now. All of this is covered in a lot greater detail in the textbook, so make sure that you are doing that textbook reading for this chapter. But I'll leave you with this, that even prior to the Civil War, we have such a huge amount of change going on and on and on. And you can almost argue that the Civil War is the product of all of those years of change. That politics are changing, society is changing, economics is changing, class is changing, right? And so we have so many different pressures coming from so many different areas at this time that it's almost like you don't know where to look and you can't stop looking for something, right? Whether that's that change in economy because of the industrial revolution, change in economy because of the transportation revolution, change in the economy because of the money problems, or change in class for all three of those reasons, change in politics for all three of those reasons. So those are three very broad um, areas of the country that are affecting every single little area of the country as well, right? And so what we'll see as we continue to move forward through the next few chapters and ultimately arrive at the Civil War is that we can kind of see these pressures happening now. That, of course, we were leading towards something. And we'll see as we go on that we did try to stop it. We did recognize it in time to try and stop it. We just didn't try very hard, right? But so that's this chapter really does a good job of highlighting all of the things that are going on outside of politics uh, throughout this time period and the things besides politics that are really leading us and pushing us towards some sort of problem between the states. So make sure that you go ahead and do that reading for chapter 9. That'll be it for the lecture for chapter 9 today. If you have any questions, as always, post them in my questions forum or send me an email and I'll be happy to answer them and work on whatever we need. And with that, I'll leave you here and I'll see you back here for lecture 10.